Hi, lovely booktubers. I'm Debs. Welcome back to my channel, Raynor Reads Stuff, or for the very last time this year, Raynor Wants It Rough. It's Sunday. It's my weekly wrap-up, which I am going to combine with my GarbAugust wrap-up. August is over. The great event, organised by Creaming Olly, has come to an end for another year. To be honest, I'm all trashed out. So, what I am going to do, I'm going to go through the books for GarbAugust that I read in the last week first. Then I'm going to go through the lists. It was week 4. 2 prompts for week 4. Novelizations or books turned into 70s or 80s miniseries. I'm going to start with the miniseries, and I obviously didn't take a photograph of the cover before I dispatched it back to Kindle, but I read Flambards by K.M. Payton, and that was a series from the 1980s that I remember very well. I have a feeling if those books were published now, they would probably be classed as YA. The writing isn't difficult. It's a sort of family saga set at the beginning of the 20th century. In the run-up, the first book is in the run-up to the First World War, and we have a family, a father and 2 boys. The father has been rendered disabled in an accident, but is a very keen huntsman. He rides. In fact, he had the hunt prior to being injured. His eldest son is also a very keen hunter. His youngest son hates it with a passion. Their mother has died. All the father cares about is his horses and the hunt, which he lives vicariously through his sons. Then a cousin, an orphaned cousin, female, is sent to the household to live. Now, she has a lot of money coming in inheritance. And I believe it's hoped that she will marry the eldest son and bring that money into Flambards, which is the name of the house that they live in. As she arrives, the youngest son has just fallen at the hunt. He is quite seriously injured. He has a very bad break in his leg. So all hell has let loose in the household. But it's the story of them as they progress through the First World War. I read these as a kid, so reading this was quite nostalgic. There's another 3 books in the series, which I would like to read again, but they're £6 on Kindle, and I don't want to pay £6 for an ebook. So maybe I'll just add them to my wish list and wait a bit and see what happens. Novelizations. First of all, Convoy by B.W.L. Norton. I love this. I love the film. I love this. It's good fun. Absolutely nothing was going to stop it. Not the National Guard, not the police, not even the FBI. The Duck had got himself the mightiest convoy ever. And good buddy, you better believe it, they intended to keep that hammer down and roll. This is just riotous. and was, at this point, I must thank Roy at Roy Reads Anything, who sent me this earlier this year for GarbAugust, and also sent me this. The Bionic Woman, A Question of Life. Maud Willis wrote this. And this is the novelisation of 2 episodes of The Bionic Woman. And I thought it was really well done. And again, I loved the series and really enjoyed this book. These were just 2 of the many books that Roy sent me. Thank you, Roy. So that ticked off novelisations and books turned into miniseries. So, these are my GarbAugust lists. As it was GarbAugust 3D, my Instagram prompts, I did indeed post a TBR stack, a happy GarbAugust selfie, my favourite trashy book. I did my favourite trashy book that I had read this GarbAugust, and my trashiest covers. So, Instagram prompts, check. Now, let's go to this long list. And I'm going to go through, I've talked about most of them already, so I'm just going to go through them very quickly. These were the weekly prompts. Week 1 was Anything Goes, and for Anything Goes, I read Surf Safari Nurse, once again sent to me by Roy, by Jane Converse. And I liked that. I would read more Jane Converse again. I also read Armageddon Sky, which was a Deep Space Nine Star Trek book. And this also ticked off something for the Summer of the Wrath of Trek. This was by L.A. Gruff, and it's subtitled Day of Honor. I also enjoyed this. This was, good fun. What you expect from Star Trek. Category Romance and Men's Adventure. So, category Romance, I have to say, isn't one of my favourites. It's something that I really only read in GarbAugust. For this, I read The Greek Wedding, subtitled She Never Had, and it's a Mills and Boon modern book by Chantal Shaw. Actually, I quite enjoyed it. It wasn't as hideous as I thought. And then for Men's Adventure, I read The Dakota Cipher by William Dietrich. And this was, although it's relatively modern, it was written in the 2000s, a typical 19th century rip-roaring adventure. It's an Ethan Gage adventure, and Ethan Gage is a traveller, spy, you name it, he can do it. He teams up with a Norwegian to try and find Thor's hammer, which they believe has been hidden somewhere in the depths of the middle of the United States. Thoroughly enjoyed that. Week 3 was Sex and or Violence. For the sex, I read a trilogy, only to find that the trilogy was actually more than a trilogy, and I'm not reading the rest. Club Lux, and that was by Olivia Noble. There was a story to it in addition to the sex, but it's not something I'll continue with. And the violence, I enjoyed this one. I read, though I can't be finding it at the moment. Oh, yes, I can. Was it that one I read? Yes, The House Without a Key by Earl Biggers. Set on Hawaii. This was the first of the Charlie Chan books, and I thought it was marvellous. And then we've done the novelisations, and the books turned into mini-series. So for each prompt, I did 2 books. Ticked off all my categories. Very pleased with that. And then we come to the bingo board. Now, I told you last week I had completed the bingo board. I was very smug about it. I'm still very smug about it. And in here, the list of books I read for these include the good, the bad, and the absolutely hideous. So be warned. First of all, the group read Jacqueline Suzanne's Valley of the Dolls. I enjoyed that. It was a good read. I'd not read it before. It was all about the entertainment industry in America and the people caught up in it and how sometimes it broke them and sometimes it made them. Yeah, it was fun. So, we're going to go through these in order. I probably won't. I'm not going to hold up the pictures of the books unless I've got them in hard copy. So, The Diary of a Drug Addict for the Drugs First Square. That was by Stephen E. Crockett, purporting to be a almost a memoir. Wasn't convinced by it. 4, Killer Kids. Number 2, I read a novel, The Godsend, Bernard Taylor. It was quite ridiculous in places, but it was gripping, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Right. Another one from Roy, 4, Sexy Vamps, My Lord Vampire by Debbie Riley. Actually, I enjoyed this. I thought the characters were quite good. The premise of the story was quite good. Yeah, that was quite a good one. Kinky sex. Now here we get to. I was watching one of Roy's videos the other day, and he described them as squelchy, which I thought was absolutely hilarious. I read Super Hot Supervisor by Mandy Harbin. Its squelchy level was probably about 8 or 9 out of 10. Probably wouldn't read it again. Unlikely to read anything by Mandy Harbin. It involved. No, I'm not going to tell you what it involved. But that was the kinky sex book ticked off. And the last one on that line is Ninjas. And for Ninjas, I read The Diary of a Ninja Kid by C.A. Tremor, and I think it's Dossanier. Kid's book about a kid who goes to a new school and is trained to be a ninja by the janitor who he befriends. Lots of farting. So, long-running series. I bought about 10 of these at a charity shop over the last couple of months. Maigret in Exile, Georges Simenon. Absolutely loved it. will get round to reading the others that I bought as well. Right. Trash in Translation. I read Assassination Classroom, which was a manga book. It was also the first in a long-running series by Yusei Matsui. I don't have it anymore because Alex and I did a book swap and I sent it to him, Alex from Alex Unabridged. Where are we? Nudity on the cover. Nudity on the cover, I read this. Howard Spring, Shabby Tiger. It says he's Britain's best-selling novelist. I don't know why there's nudity on the cover because most of it isn't about that. But obviously, gratuitous nudity to make people buy books. It was quite a good story though, and I will read more of Howard Spring because I'm intrigued by the fact that it says he's Britain's best-selling novelist. Gangs, I read Sol Uric's The Warriors, which is probably one of my favourite cult films. The book was excellent. It was different to the film, but it was really good and I thoroughly enjoyed it. The other thing was that it was published in 1965, which is the year of my birth. And I've started to do the My Novel Life challenge that Olly has picked up. Olly from Crimin Olly has picked up from Instagram from a guy called Mark Hodder. So that also ticked off the first of my Novel Life books. Next we come to cults. For cults, I read an absolutely hideous novella called Cult Initiation by Myra Shell. And I say hideous because the levels of squelchiness were just off the scale. And there was a vague story to this book that I think you could probably have summed up in 2 sentences. The rest was porn. So, won't be reading any of her anymore. And now we get to conspiracy theory. I read a book called The AI Singularity Experiment 2 by Noah Toyer. I haven't read 1. This sits right in the middle, I think, of my reading rankings for this month. It was okay. Had quite a good premise to it about AI, obviously. But yeah, it sort of worked for me. Now, for Vigilante, I read The Assassin, Manhattan Massacre. And this is by Peter McCurtain. It's yet another book that Roy sent me. And I loved it. I thought it was great. I would definitely read more for future trashy events, should they materialise. I like the cover too. But yeah, that was an entertaining read. A guy's family is killed. His wife and son are killed by the mafia. And he sets out to hunt them down and destroy them. Now, 2 tributes in the middle, Pax and Alice, and I did both. So, for Pax, I read The London Tram Murders by John Broughton, and apart from the fact that there were a couple of what I thought were errors at the beginning of the book, the rest of it was fine. I read a cosy, witchy mystery with cats in honour of Alice, and that was Witchy Awakening by C.A. Phipps. 3D movie or step back cover? I've got always thank for this one too. Lois Battles, A Habit of the Blood. This was set in Jamaica. It was a nice step back cover. Bit of a family saga. Here's all our characters. It's about the wealthy people of Jamaica, and I could see it as a 1980s miniseries. It wasn't, but it would have made a good one. It was written in 1987. They could have just squeezed it in. For modern trash, Creaming Olly presents the GarbAugust anthology of awesome trash, edited by Troy Trader. It's Garbology. I loved this. I thought it was great fun. Really enjoyed reading all the stories, particularly the stories from people that I have got to know over the last months on BookTube. So that was great. Then we get to exclamation mark in the title. I went with Nicor because I'd seen it on Greg at another Boobiephile Reads channel, and that is by Peter Tremaine. There was an awful lot packed into this book. We had sea monsters attacking everything in sight and a homicidal maniac. And all the protagonists were on an oil rig. So that was a lot of fun. Based on a video game, I went for something really simple. And I read Super Mario Brothers Go to Gotham. The Princess is Stolen by Penguin and Joker and taken to Gotham City. And Mario and Luigi have to go and help and rescue her, and they're helped by Batman. This was by Sean McDermott. More Than Two Guns on the cover. I went with Run Wild to Glory by Marshall Grover. It's a Larian stretch western written by an Australian in the 2010s. I like them. I've read 4 or 5 now. They're not too serious at all. I just think they're good fun. Wouldn't watch or read on the bus. This was one of my big mistakes as GarbAugust. I went for something called My Vagina Smells of Sulphur. It was hardcore porn and gore. It was not for me. I did work my way through it. The author is listed as C. Commissar. Her real name is Sharon. I won't be reading any of her stuff again. It was hideous. It was gross. And the squelchiness level. Killer Animals is the next up. I read Slither by John Hawkin. I did start something called Cows, but I didn't like it, so I DNF'd it and went with Slither from the 1980s by John Hawkin, about worms that grow, develop teeth and eyes, and then they eat people. The host recommendation, I went with The Meg by Steve Alton, and I really enjoyed it, and I will probably read more. Yeah, love that. Okay. Weirdly specific subgenre. This is another of my big mistakes for GarbAugust. I don't know what I thought a book by Misty Vixen entitled Goblin Girls Do It Better was going to be about. But, yeah, squelchiness out of 10, probably 15. No more Goblin Girls for me. Moral Panic, why did I mention that earlier? Anyway, Moral Panic, The AI Singularity Experiments by Noah Toya. Written or directed under a pseudonym. I went with Gutter in the Grave by Ed McBain, whose real name is Salvatore Albert Lombino. Nothing like any of his pseudonyms, really. But The Gutter in the Grave is a good book, and I like it. I like Ed McBain, so that was an enjoyable read. And for giallo or slasher, by this time I had read all the other hideousness, so I decided I was just going to go for giallo. And I went for The Case of the Howling Dog, which is number 4 in the Perry Mason books and is by L. Stanley Gardner. So, all ticked off. I'm very pleased that all of the prompts and all of the bingo cards were ticked off with different books. Then we get to the third dimension of GarbAugust 3D, and that was the decades. Now, I did hope to get back a little further than this, but like I say, I'd had my fill of trash by the middle of last week. So what we've got is, for the 2020s, Garbology. Most of these are repeats. This is the only place that I repeated myself. So these are books that I've read for other sections of the GarbAugust challenges. 2010s was the Marshall Grover Westerns, Larry and Stretch. 2000s was the Dakota Cipher from William Dietrich. 1990s was the Star Trek Armageddon Sky by L.A. Graff. 1980s was Slither by John Hawkin. 1970s was the first of the Assassin books, Manhattan Massacre by Peter McCurtain. 60s was The Warriors by Saul Urich. 50s was The Gutter and the Grave by Ed McBain. Maigret in Exile by Georges Simenon was the 40s. 1930s was The Case of the Howling Dog by Earl Stanley Gardner. The House Without a Key, which is the Charlie Chan book by Elder Biggers, was the 1920s. The Mystery of Dr. Fu Manchu by Sax Rohmer, I read as an additional one to tick off the 1910s. Loved it. Remember watching the films when I was a kid. There's obviously a certain amount of things we wouldn't say about non-white people, but it was written in 1910, so I think you could expect a different type of language than we use now. 1900s. I found on Kindle one of these mega packs, and this one was the Arsène Lupin mega pack. So I read The Extraordinary Adventures of Arsène Lupin, who is a French master thief. The books were written by Maurice Leblanc, and they're very good. I really like them. I am definitely going to read some more. And finally, I went back to 1890 and I read The Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells. Now, I don't think The Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells is a trashy book, but that's a trashy cover. Don't like that at all. So, I ticked off 2 prompts for each week, and all of them in go prompts, using different books for every single one. I did my 4 Instagram prompts and went back 140 years in the decades. I'm going to count that as a success for GarbAugust. I've had an absolutely wonderful time. Thank you to Olly and all the co-hosts, who I will list below. Thank you especially to Roy, who sent me a lot of these books. And that's the end of Raynor Wants It Rough for this year. Maybe we'll see you next year. I hope so. Let me know what you've been reading, and I hope you've had fun with it. That's all for today. Bye for now.